Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be comparing the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392 to the Mercedes G550 G-Wagon. So I guess it's real G-Wagon against wannabe G-Wagon. But anyways, before we get in this video, a huge shout out and thank you to the Mercedes-Benz of Farmington for giving me some time with this G550. This particular one is available for sale, so if you're interested, I'll include a link to their inventory in the description down below. If you have any questions or need any help, just ask for John Moore. And then on a side note, if you want to save time and money, the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. So under the hood of the Wrangler, we have a naturally aspirated 6.4 liter Hemi V8 that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy is 13 around town and then 17 on the highway, with power outputs being 470 horsepower and then 470 pound-feet of torque. Now under the hood of the G550, we have a twin-turbo 4-liter V8 that goes through a 9-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy with this is 14 around town and then 17 on the highway, with power outputs being 416 horsepower and then 450 pound-feet of torque. Obviously, you can get the 63 version of the G-Wagon, which has quite a bit more power, but I feel like the 550 is more comparable to this Wrangler. Now, before we go over the front ends, I do want to mention, if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Now, when it comes to front end design, obviously they're both big boxy SUVs, but there are some distinctive differences. So first off, with the Wrangler, you got the Hydro Guide there in the center, and then obviously the 392 badges. This one has the satin black front grille, and then you guys can see with the bumper, this has been made for off-roading. You've got these side pieces that you can take off, and well, look how aggressive that is sculpted. And by the way, this has 12.9 inches of ground clearance, and that theme will continue throughout the rest of the Wrangler. Now, popping over to the G-Wagon, I feel like it's kind of boxier than the Wrangler, if that makes sense. I know that sounds weird, but just look at like the lines there on the hood. Everything just is a little bit sharper. Obviously, you got the turn signal indicators on the hood as well, and then round headlights, just like the Jeep. And then we got the brush guard here on the front end of the 550. Now, we have protection underneath, just like the Jeep, but quite a bit less ground clearance, 9.5 inches here with the G550. Something that I want to quickly mention is, although the Jeep has more ground clearance, the G550 is super tall. Like, they're about the same height. So starting over here with the Jeep, our tire wheel setup is 315/70/17 in the front and in the rear. And then over at the G-Wagon, it is 275/50/20 in the front and in the rear. So obviously more of like a street setup with these AMG wheels. And then this is more of an off-road type setup with the 35s and the 17-inch wheels. Now, as you can see with the Wrangler, we have a solid front axle, whereas it's harder to see with the G-Wagon, but we have independent front suspension. Now, look at the fender flares here in the G-Wagon, how they're body painted. The Wrangler fender flares are also body painted, but they're also like way bigger. There's a lot less body and a lot more fender flare with the Wrangler. And then you guys can see other elements. You got like lots of like plastic here on the Wrangler, whereas everything on the G-Wagon is pretty much painted, or you've got like nice metallic trim like on the side steps, for example, which I guess these would also double as rock rails. The Wrangler has kind of like your regular rock rails. And then here in the rear, we have a solid axle with the Wrangler. And then the G-Wagon also has a solid axle. Now, taking a look at the key fobs, you guys can see the Mercedes key fob, obviously quite a bit fancier, but I will say the Jeep key fob is pretty sweet with how like custom it looks. But notice with the Jeep, we got remote start in the key fob. With the Mercedes, we don't. Now, popping into the rear of the G-Wagon, you guys will notice that we have quite a bit of storage space, especially vertical space. And then we have a cargo cover built in from the factory, and then you have like leather trim here on the back, which I find absolutely hilarious. And then look at like the carbon fiber. And then obviously being a G-Wagon, well, it all goes in one motion with like the window and the door all connected, but also nice sound. Now with the Wrangler, it's a little bit more basic. First off, the hatch itself is a little bit heavier to open than the G-Wagon because of that 35 on the back, but notice the window is separate. And then when it comes to storage space, it actually is a little bit less spacious when it comes to vertical room. Horizontal room looks about the same, but again, I think that's the benefit of the G-Wagon just being such a tall vehicle. By the way, closing it is all the same, so window and then hatch second. Now with the rest of the rear, you guys can see spare tires on both of them, but with the G-Wagon, we've got this fancy tire cover to, I guess, make it look a little bit more luxury. Parking sensors here at the bumper, and then we do have recovery points. We also had recovery points on the front with the G-Wagon, but again, just look how like tall it is. Whereas with the Wrangler, again, it's tall, but a big part of the reason why it's tall is because it's lifted. But anyways, you can see the 35 there on the back, and we got the reinforcement for that 35. Parking sensors there, we got a receiver hitch. We also have a recovery point. Now popping inside of the G550, what you'll notice is we've got really nice leather trim here at the top of the door panel and then also down below. And look at like the carbon fiber, Burmester sound system, heated seats for the rear. Look at that window control as well. And then the seats themselves, really nice leather trim as you can see. And I like that, and we'll pop in quickly, which there's no grab handle like right there. It's up above, which yeah, it's not the most useful, I will say that. Legroom back here is pretty good. We've got some vents back here. We've got our own climate controls as well. We even have a cup holder armrest, which is always very important. And then headroom is obviously, I mean, it's a G-Wagon. It's got tons of headroom. Anyways, let's head to the Wrangler. Now popping over to the Wrangler, you guys can see with the door panel, a lot more like basic with the appearance and material use, but the handle, I mean, that looks nice. And then same thing with these seats. But the big thing with these seats is they're supposed to be easy to clean off with off-roading. And then you guys can see window controls there in the center, got some outlets and everything. And then popping into the Wrangler, you got a grab handle here, which helps out quite a bit with getting in. Legroom back here, I feel like is pretty similar. Yeah, I mean, it feels like a pretty similar cabin in terms of the space. It's just that cabin's nicer, but let's head to the front of the G-Wagon. Now popping over to the front, you guys can see same theme here with the door panel, really nice trim all over with all the leather and the carbon fiber. And then you guys can see here for the memory seat function and the adjustments for the seats. We have heated seats here with the G-Wagon. Again, speaker for the Burmester sound system. And then look at all the window controls there. And then blind spot monitoring with the mirrors. And then again, really nice leather seats here with the G550. And then nice looking pedals. And you guys can see with the lane departure light control. And then popping into the front, a little bit easier than the back. I will say that. And then listen to the sound. So nice. Ooh. So really nice leather wrapped steering wheel with paddles there on the back for that 9-speed automatic. You got the controls here for the infotainment system, volume controls, cruise control, and then control for the center stack. And that's one big difference is going to be the gauge cluster. So this has a full digital gauge cluster, which you can actually kind of like customize. So notice that we're in the classic. We can go to like a sport view, or we can go to a progressive view as well. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that the classic though is probably the nicest looking out of the viewpoints there with the gauge cluster. Sorry about the camera not wanting to focus. It's because it's changing too much. Anyways, with the G-Wagon, we just have a rear camera. If you want a 360 camera system, you actually have to get a G63, which is kind of interesting. Now, the infotainment system is not a touchscreen. Everything's controlled via a dial or a touchpad. So I feel like that is one downside with the G-Wagon compared to the Wrangler, is the fact that you don't have a touchscreen infotainment system. And then you guys will notice tons of like carbon fiber leather trim here in the interior, even on the grab handle, carbon fiber leather trim. And then a really nice vents here with our lockers. We have a center locker, a rear locker, and a front locker here with the G550. And by the way, it's in all-wheel, or not all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive all the time. It's four-wheel high right now. Your dual zone climate controls here as well, and then more carbon fiber trim. And this is to control the infotainment system, if you're wondering. We do have a bunch of different drive modes here. We've got an eco, comfort, sport, individual, and then a desert mode as well. And by the way, this one has the adjustable suspension, so you can see that changes with the drive modes. And then the G-Wagon does come with a 4-wheel drive low, so you guys can see the low range right there. And then here's the center console, nice and spacious. Really nice trim here on the top. And then look at the glove box as well. And then up top, we do have a sunroof here, and then just like a nicer headliner with the material use. And then popping over to Le Wrangler, you guys can see the theme continues. Sorry about my door panel being dirty. I took this off-road recently. But with like the padding and everything, you got blind spot monitoring with the mirrors. And then here are the front seats. And I will say the Wrangler front seats are comfortable, not as comfortable as the G-Wagon. But yeah, it doesn't sound as cool as the G-Wagon. But that sounds good. So with the steering wheel, I will actually, sorry about that. I will actually say that I think the Wrangler steering wheel might look like cooler in some aspects, like with this perforated leather on the side. And then also with the paddle shifters, those look nicer than the plasticky ones you have on that G550. You also got like a cruise control. And then with the gauge cluster, right, mostly analog. You got a little screen here in the center though, which is great. Definitely a lot louder, but I do have an aftermarket exhaust on this, so that is something to take into account. Now the camera system is definitely a little bit better. Resolution's pretty similar, but we have a front camera as well as a backup camera, so that's more practical. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, it's actually a touchscreen, so that's also, I think, a little bit better. And then you guys can see for our climate controls, heated seats, heated steering wheel. So we're actually staying with that because the G-Wagon doesn't have air-conditioned seats and this one doesn't either. And then that's actually to make the exhaust quieter. All of our window controls here in the center. And then with the off-road situation, we have front rear lockers and a sway bar disconnect. So the G-Wagon technically has more lockers, but this one has a sway bar disconnect, and this one also has solid axles front and rear, so this should still be better at crawling. And then with our four-wheel drive system, we're in four-wheel auto all the time. This does have four-wheel high part time and then four-wheel low, and then a shifter for the 8-speed automatic. And you guys can see the parking brake here, and then some cup holders. Center console, pretty standard. Not as big as the G-Wagons. I'd say like it's deeper, but it's not as like long, if that makes sense. And then we still have a grab handle, but obviously more utilitarian, right, with material use. And then no sunroof, because you can obviously take the top off since it's a Wrangler. And then for the back portion, you do have to use tools. Now, when it comes to pricing, this G550 has equipped stickers for $155,000, and then this Wrangler has equipped stickers for $86,000. Obviously, I've done quite a bit of driving with this because this is my personal Jeep, and then I've also reviewed quite a few G-Wagons, so I have an idea of how they review. I just want, or drive rather, not how they review. I just want to get a quick video of accelerations in the exact same location with both of the vehicles at the same exact time, same exact day, everything, just to see which one feels faster, right? G550 or Wrangler 392. The Wrangler 392 in theory should be faster, but we're also at pretty high elevation. So yeah, I mean, your guess is frankly as good as mine. This is our little, I guess, test track area here, which will pop down. We still got that Escalade there. I wonder what this person does sitting here in this Escalade. Just like, they're just always there. They're just always there. Maybe there's something back there that we're not supposed to see. Who knows? But what I will say is the Wrangler definitely not as insulated as the G-Wagon, right? You hear more wind noise. The seats are comfortable, but they're not quite as comfortable. And then you hear the exhaust a lot more. The exhaust is louder. I had the door open for the exhaust clip on both of them, so the exhaust is already louder. But the other thing is, like, there's just less insulation here, so you definitely hear a lot more. So we'll kind of like, again, we'll kind of compare that versus the other one, versus the G-Wagon. But what I will say is super loud, and definitely like it punches hard off the line. Okay, so let's do the same thing. We'll set off here in the G550. Now I can say this still sounds really good inside. Like, don't get me wrong, the Wrangler is like loud and obnoxious and rowdy, but like you still get a nice V8 rumble here with the G550. So I don't feel like you're necessarily, you know, missing out when it comes to V8 sound and V8 fun. What I will say though is seats, definitely like the leather is more comfortable. The steering's also a lot better, right? The Wrangler steering is kind of wishy-washy all over the place. This, having independent front suspension, means that the steering is definitely tighter. So it drives differently. This drives tighter, and the ride quality is a lot better. Even though the Wrangler has 35s and this has 20-inch wheels, right? This still rides better. And so you imagine this with all-terrain tires, I mean, it would just be a dream boat when it comes to ride quality. Let's hope the Escalade guy doesn't get too suspicious of us. Don't worry, we're just filming some YouTube videos. We're not trying to go through any gates or anything like that. Now I do want to mention that this definitely is like way more insulated. Like everything, like I said, wind noise, everything. It's a full-on luxury car compared to the Wrangler, which is what you'd hope with Mercedes, right? Turning radius on both of them is just as horrible. Four-wheel drive, big SUVs, of course the turning radius is not going to be great. Actually, the G-Wagon might be even slightly worse than the Wrangler, but they're both not great whatsoever. So we'll kind of... The Wrangler definitely punches harder, that's for sure. The Wrangler definitely punches harder. So, Yeah, you can perceive an acceleration difference between them. What I will say that I noticed about this though is that like it seems like it's, even in sport mode, it's almost like trying to optimize for fuel economy in a sense. So I guess you could do manual mode and that would kind of even things out. But I've driven, again, both of them at higher speeds, and the other thing I will say is I feel like the Wrangler kind of like peters out a little bit sooner than even the G550, the acceleration. So to cap things off quickly with this comparison, I think both of them look really cool. They're both, I think, very desirable vehicles. But I mean, they're just so different, right? The Wrangler is like your crazy, you know, off-road, body on frame monstrosity. And this is a great off-roader, but I feel like you'd have to put a lot of money into this to make it so that it was like as capable as a Wrangler off-road, because you'd have to put a pretty big lift on this and bigger tires and all that kind of stuff. So I guess if you're like dedicated towards off-roading, yeah, Wrangler 392. But if you're not going to be doing as much off-roading, which I don't think anyone that has a G-Wagon really takes them off-road, then yeah, the G-Wagon's a much better luxury vehicle. But I guess the question that everyone wants answered, does the Wrangler give you the G-Wagon experience at a fraction of the cost? And as a Wrangler 392 owner, the answer is no. The G-Wagon still has a special feel to it. It still has like this, like, again, it's full-on luxury combined with the off-roader stuff, and then like little things like the doors, right? Like the door locks, that sound, as well as closing the door, like it's just little things like that. Like, listen to this, little things like that that the Wrangler doesn't have, and just the overall fit and finish. And so in terms of like just V8 body on frame SUV fun, yes, the Wrangler will give that to you, but it doesn't give you the G-Wagon experience. The closest thing to give you a G-Wagon experience is the V8 Defender, but even the V8 Defender falls short of the like tank-like sturdy feel of the G-Wagon. I would still say, and again, this is as someone who owns a Defender and as someone who owns a Wrangler, the G-Wagon is still kind of in a class all of its own.